My name is Dorothy Mae Whitfield. I am 74 years old. I kept books for 30 years, and I raised my children in a white house on Caldwell Street in Clarksville, Tennessee. I balanced ledgers before spreadsheets existed. I know how to count, I know how to wait, and I know exactly the day someone stops seeing you as a person and starts seeing you as a problem to be solved. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind that smells like pot roast and cut grass, when my oldest daughter, Linda, walked into my living room with a buyer, a realtor, and a signed contract for my house. She was wearing a navy blazer, the one she puts on when she wants to look like the adult in the room. She had a rolling suitcase in one hand and my brown leather travel bag in the other, the one I have carried since 1987. She had packed it herself. She had not asked me. She set it down in front of everyone, looked me in the eye, and said it. Said it out loud, in front of her husband Craig, two of her cousins, her sister-in-law Patricia, the buyer, and the realtor. She said, "You're just a burden now, Mom." What she did not know, what no one in that room knew except two people, was that 5 weeks before that Sunday, I had signed a quitclaim deed with a life estate recorded at the Montgomery County Register of Deeds, transferring that house to my youngest son, Daniel. Irrevocable, witnessed, stamped. And the recorded copy of that deed was sitting in the inner pocket of the brown leather bag she had just handed me. My old friend Robert Calloway, who witnessed my wedding 50 years ago, was also in that room. He had his briefcase with him. When the buyer reached for the contract, Robert opened that briefcase, and everything Linda had been planning for months came apart in about 90 seconds. If you have ever been told you are too old to make your own decisions, stay with me, because what happened next is something I want you to see. Let me take you back to where this really started. My husband Earl died 3 years ago. 47 years of marriage. He was 68. I was 71. After the funeral, after the last casserole dish had been picked up and the sympathy cards had stopped coming, I was alone in the house for the first time in my adult life. And I was fine. I want you to understand that. I was grieving, but I was fine. I paid my bills on time. I kept my garden. I drove myself to the grocery store, to church, to my doctor appointments. I was doing what I had always done. I was managing. Linda started coming by more often, which I appreciated at first. She would bring groceries. She would offer to drive. In the first year, I thought she was being a good daughter. But I kept my notebook, a dark green hardcover that I have used for years to track appointments, payments, decisions, anything that matters. And somewhere in that first year, I started writing down things that felt off. Small things. She started calling the pharmacy directly, without telling me, to ask about my medications. She asked my bank to add her name to the account, in case of an emergency. I agreed to that one because it seemed reasonable at the time. I noted the date in my notebook, March 14th. Then she started correcting me in public, not gently, in front of people. She would say things like, "Mom, you already told us that," or "Mom, let me handle it." She would look at whoever we were with in a way that said, "You see how I have to manage her?" I noticed it. I did not say anything yet. I wrote it down. The moment that changed everything came about 8 months after Earl died. We were at Sunday dinner at my sister-in-law Patty's house. Linda told Patty that I had been forgetting things, that I had left the stove on, that she was worried about me being alone. She said it in that careful, sad voice people use when they want to sound loving, while they take something away from you. What she did not know, what she forgot, because she was not paying attention to me in the way I was paying attention to her, was that I had balanced my bank statement to the cent that same morning. $47.12. I had it in my notebook. I showed no one. I just sat there and listened. And that night, I called Robert Calloway. Robert and I have known each other since we were in our 20s. He was a groomsman at my wedding. He has been a real estate attorney in Clarksville for over 40 years. I asked him if we could meet that week. I did not tell him why on the phone. I just said I needed to talk through some options about the house. A few weeks passed. I watched Linda watch me. I said nothing. Then one evening, she came over with a folder. She sat down at my kitchen table and told me she had found a very good assisted living facility about 20 miles outside of town. Private room, activities, meals, the whole thing. She said she had already spoken with someone there. She said the house had been appraised. She said the timing was good. She had appraised my house without asking me. Let me be clear about what that means. She had arranged for a professional to come to my home, evaluate my property, and assign it a market value, without my knowledge and without my permission. The appraisal said $295,000. She showed me the paper like it was good news. I asked her to leave the folder so I could look it over. She did. I thanked her for dinner. I closed the door behind her. Then I went to my desk. And that is when I found it. In the back of the folder, behind the assisted living brochure, was a document I had never seen. A real estate purchase agreement. It listed Craig Hurst, my son-in-law, as the legal representative of the property owner. He had signed it 2 weeks earlier. He had signed a purchase agreement for my house as my representative, without a power of attorney, without any legal authority, without my knowledge. I sat at that desk for a long time. I am 74 years old. I have kept books for 30 years. I know what a forged authority looks like. I know what it means when someone signs a contract using a role they do not have. I thought about what Linda had said at Patty's house. I thought about the pharmacy calls, the bank account, the appraisals I did not approve, and I understood very clearly what was happening. This was not about my well-being. This was about money. Craig had debts. I would find out later it was close to $190,000, and they had identified my house as the way out. The care facility was a cover story. They needed $295,000, and the fastest path to it was convincing everyone, including me, that I was incapable of managing on my own. I sat there quietly. I served myself a cup of tea. And then I called Robert. I told him I needed to do the deed transfer that week. Have you ever felt someone making decisions for you as if you no longer existed? As if your name on a piece of paper was just an inconvenience standing between them and what they wanted? If you have, I want you to know that feeling has a remedy. It requires patience. It requires a clear head. And it requires knowing exactly what your rights are before anyone else in the room does. Robert and I met 2 days later. He explained the process carefully. I could execute a quitclaim deed transferring the house to Daniel, my youngest son, while retaining a life estate. That means the house would become Daniel's property from the moment it was recorded, but I would retain the legal right to live in it, use it, and make decisions about it for the rest of my life. It would be recorded at the Montgomery County Register of Deeds, a public record, irrevocable once filed. No one could undo it without my death. No sale could proceed without Daniel's consent, and Daniel did not owe Craig anything. I signed the deed that same week. Robert filed it at the county recorder's office. It was stamped, recorded, and assigned a document number. As of that filing, 5 weeks before the Sunday Linda brought a buyer into my living room, the house at Caldwell Street was no longer mine to sell because it already belonged to Daniel. Robert made me a certified copy of the recorded deed. I put it in the inner pocket of my brown leather travel bag, the one I have had since 1987, the one with the zipper pocket inside that most people do not know exists. I put it there alongside my notebook. Then I zipped it shut, set the bag on the shelf in my closet, and waited. Can you imagine packing your own bag, knowing the outcome is already sealed? I went about my days. I watered my garden. I answered Linda's phone calls. I did not lie to her. I simply did not offer information she had not earned. 3 days later, I called Daniel. He was at work in Nashville when I reached him. I told him the transfer was done. He cried. He is 42 years old, and he cried. And I listened to him cry, because I understood why. He said, "Mama, you didn't have to do this." I said, "I know. I wanted to." Then I asked him to come to Clarksville on a Sunday, 3 weeks out. I would let him know the specific date. I told him there would be a family meeting, and I needed him there. I did not tell him what was going to happen. I just said, "Trust me." He said he would be there. Linda arranged the meeting. She told me it was to discuss the transition plan. She said there would be a few people from the family and that the buyer and his realtor would also be present to finalize the paperwork. She said it matter-of-factly, the way you announce something that is already decided. I told her that sounded fine and asked if Sunday afternoon worked. It did. I also called Robert and told him the date. I told him to come as an old family friend. He said he understood completely. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully. A gray blouse, dark slacks, the pearl earrings Earl gave me for our 25th anniversary. I made a full pot of coffee, set out cups, put a plate of cookies on the counter. If someone was going to be in my home, they were going to be treated with courtesy. That is who I am. People began arriving around 2 in the afternoon. Craig came first, then 2 of Linda's cousins, Gerald and Maureen, who sat in the corner and mostly kept quiet. Then Patricia, my nosy sister-in-law, who had appointed herself the family spokesperson ever since Earl passed. The buyer was a man in his 40s named Bill. He had the look of someone who had done this before, bought houses from families in distress, and knew how to move quickly. His realtor was a younger woman with a tablet. And Robert arrived, said hello to a few people, set his briefcase by the wall, and took a seat near the window. Daniel arrived last. He drove up from Nashville. He hugged me in the doorway for a long moment without speaking. Then he sat down next to me. Linda stood at the center of the living room. She had papers arranged on the coffee table. She spoke to the room like she was running a meeting, which I suppose she thought she was. She said I had been showing signs of difficulty managing on my own. She said the facility she had found was excellent. She said the house sale would cover the costs and provide a remainder for future needs. She used the words best interest 4 times. I counted. Then she picked up my brown leather bag from where she had set it near the door. She had brought it out of my bedroom herself and placed it there as a visual statement, I understood. And she held it up and said to the room, to everyone, to her cousins and her sister-in-law and the buyer and the man who would end up holding a worthless contract, "She can't manage alone anymore. You're just a burden now, Mom." There it was, said out loud, said in public, said in the house I had owned for 31 years, in front of people who had eaten at my table. If your family has ever cast you aside, if someone has ever looked at you and decided you were finished, I want you to leave a heart here, because you deserve to be seen. I looked at Robert. He opened his briefcase. The buyer had started to reach for the contract on the table. The realtor was pulling up something on her tablet. Craig was leaning forward in his chair, with the posture of a man who thinks the hard part is almost over. Robert placed a document on the table. He placed it calmly, the way a man places a card when he knows what it is. He said, "Before anything is signed, I'd like everyone to look at this." It was the recorded quitclaim deed with life estate, stamped by the Montgomery County Register of Deeds, dated 5 weeks prior, transferring the property at Caldwell Street from Dorothy Nay Whitfield to Daniel James Whitfield, with Dorothy Nay Whitfield retaining full life estate rights. The realtor looked at it. Then she looked at her buyer. The buyer looked at Craig. Craig went completely still. I reached into my brown leather bag, into the inner pocket, the one with the zipper that most people do not know exists. I removed my own certified copy of the deed, and I removed my notebook. I set them both on the table, and then I said it. I said it quietly, the way I say everything, because I have never needed to raise my voice to be heard. You called me a burden, but a burden doesn't transfer property. A burden doesn't see what you've been doing for months. A burden doesn't call her attorney, review a forged purchase agreement, and record an irrevocable deed before any of you walked into this room. The buyer stood up. He said he needed to make a phone call. He and his realtor were gone within 5 minutes. Craig sat where he was. He understood what had happened. The house, the asset he had pledged as collateral for a loan of nearly $190,000, was no longer something he could deliver. It had not been his to deliver for 5 weeks. The bank that held his debt would be notified. The collateral was gone. Linda said nothing for a long time. When she finally spoke, she asked how long I had known. I said, long enough. Daniel stood up from his seat, took the deed from the table, held it in both hands. He looked at me. I nodded. Gerald and Maureen left quietly. Patricia sat in her corner for another 10 minutes, then excused herself. I had the sense she would be on the phone before she reached her car, and I did not mind. Some information is worth letting travel. In the days that followed, word moved through Clarksville the way it does in a town this size, person to person, carefully, with the particular satisfaction people take in a story that ends correctly. Craig's bank sent a formal notice that the collateral arrangement was invalid. Whatever loan he had secured would need to be renegotiated or called. Linda did not call me for 2 weeks. When she did, I answered. I am her mother. That does not change. About 10 days after the meeting, my granddaughter Emma, she's 8 years old, Linda's youngest, came over on a Saturday afternoon. She had her backpack on. She asked if she could stay the night at Grandma's house. She said it very specifically, Grandma's house, like she had heard something and was choosing a side, in the way children do, through love rather than argument. I made her a grilled cheese sandwich, and we watched a movie, and she fell asleep on the couch with her shoes still on. I covered her with the blanket and sat in the armchair in the dark and listened to her breathe. When Linda came to pick her up the next morning, I told her she was always welcome in this house. I told her that Emma was always welcome. But I also told her this: the decisions made in this house, about my life, about my care, about what happens to me, those decisions are mine. And now, when the time comes, they will be Daniel's. That is recorded at the Montgomery County Register of Deeds, document number and all. She nodded. She did not argue. There was nothing left to argue about. I am sitting on my porch now with a cup of tea. The brown leather bag is back on its shelf. My notebook is on the table beside me, open to a blank page that I have not yet needed to write on. My garden is growing. The White House on Caldwell Street is exactly where it has always been. I have been told, since I turned 70, that the world has a habit of deciding when you are done. That once you reach a certain age, the people around you begin to manage you rather than hear you. That your judgment becomes suspect, your preferences become inconveniences, and your rights become suggestions. I want to tell you, from this porch, in this town, at 74, that is not the truth. Or rather, it is only the truth if you let it be. If you stop counting. If you stop writing things down. If you forget that a deed recorded at a county clerk's office is as irrevocable as the law itself. I kept books for 30 years. I know how to count. I know how to wait. And I know that dignity is not something anyone else can grant you or revoke from you, no matter what they put on a piece of paper and slide across a coffee table. My name is Dorothy Mae Whitfield. I am 74 years old, and this is still my house. If you have an elderly person in your family, a parent, a grandparent, an aunt or uncle, who is being managed instead of listened to, who is being moved around like a problem instead of honored like a person, I want you to tell me about them in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me their name if you want. Tell me one thing they are still good at, because I promise you, they are still good at something, and they deserve to be seen.